فكلي واشربي وقري عينا فإما ترين من البشر أحدا فقولي إني نذرت للرحمن صوما.
Hi everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Thanks so much for joining the Islamic Mary podcast. So today we're going to speak about the idea of divine questioning. As I've discussed, Maryam has a origin story of her own. She is born, she is raised, she begins to have her own miracle, she starts teaching people like Zechariah, and eventually she's given the news that she's going to give birth to Jesus. Now, in this discussion and informing that she's going to give birth to Jesus, Isa, she begins to ask questions, and she starts asking how could this actually happen? And in verse 45 of chapter 3 or Ali Imran, the angel said, Mary, God gives you news of a word from him, whose name will be Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, who will be held in honor in this world and the next, who will be one of those brought near to God. He will speak to people in his infancy and his adulthood. He will be one of the righteous. She said, My Lord, how can I have a son when no man has touched me? The angel said, This is how God creates what he will. Now, what I love about this section in the Quran is that it represents a larger theme where the prophetic and righteous figures, they begin to ask questions. And they don't just accept the divine decree or the divine message, but they ask, how can something like this actually occur? And in the Arabic, she says that no man has literally touched me. And in Arabic, the word massa is literally a touch. And she's saying that I've not been unchaste. I haven't touched a man ever in a physical or sexual way. And then the angel responds, قَالَ كَذَلِكَ Allahu yakhluqu ma yasha, that verily God has the ability to create whatever he wills. إِذَا قَضَى أَمَرًا فَإِنَّمَا يَقُولُ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونُ. And this is a common refrain in the Quran, that if God has the ability or decrees for something in particular, it's kun fayakun. It is be and it is. So Maryam is in this really interesting position now where, unlike Zechariah, she doesn't ask for a child. However, an angel comes, informs her that she is going to have a child, and she responds in a question that many of us would ask. This is impossible. That if I here am a virgin, I never had physical relationships with a man, and all of a sudden now I'm going to have a child. And now the angel is teaching her and telling her, just like the way Maryam taught Zechariah and told him that God has the ability to provide unlimitedly. In the same way, God has the ability to create in whatever way he likes. And we see that this is a common theme within the Quran, that many of the Quranic figures, they also ask God questions, and they don't simply accept the divine decree or even basic theological arguments. So one of them is Abraham. So Abraham in the Quran, Ibrahim, is a really fascinating figure. He's someone that is always questioning, debating people. There's one famous story where he goes and he breaks all the idols in his town. And they ask, who could have done this to our gods? And they said, there is this boy, his name is Ibrahim. Let's bring him forward. And then they bring Ibrahim forward, and then they say, Ibrahim, are you the one that did this? And he said, no, it was the biggest one. It was the biggest idol. And here he's being facetious, he's being provocative. He's telling his people that, is it possible that an idol that you worship doesn't have the ability to create and doesn't have the ability to destroy? So Abraham has this from his youth all the way to his adulthood, where he's always challenging the status quo, and he's even asking God questions about faith and reasoning. And there's this famous verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, or the chapter of the cow, in verse 260, where he asked God about the theological question of resurrection. And when Abraham said, "My Lord, show me how you give life to the dead," he said, "God, do you not believe then?" "Yes," said Abraham, "but just to put my heart at rest." So God said, "Take 4 birds and train them to come back to you. Then place them on a separate hilltops, call them back, and they will come flying to you. Know that God is all-powerful and wise." And here in the Arabic, God says to Abraham, "Qala awalam tu'min," don't you believe? Aren't you a believer? How are you asking for this idea of resurrection? This is the basic tenet of faith, especially Muslim faith, that all of us will be resurrected and held accountable in front of God. And then Abraham, he responds, he says, "Qala bala walakin liyatma'inna qalbi." And he says, "Yes, I do believe, but I want to have tranquility in my heart. I want my heart to be reassured, and I want it to be at rest. I'm a believer. I believe in God. I believe that God can do whatever he likes. But I have this question. I have this doubt." And that's when he goes and he takes these 4 birds, he puts them into different hilltops, he slaughters them, and then he calls them back. And he sees in front of him the power and the miracle of God, that he has the ability to bring life from death. Kayfa tuhyi al-mawta. That how is it possible that you can bring the dead back to life? We also see this in different parts of the Quran, where Abraham is questioning, he's debating, and not just with his people or with God, but he also is someone who is debating with his son. And in the Quran, Ibrahim, he goes to his father and he debates, and he says, how is it possible that you could create idols and gods that do not speak, that they do not hear? That this, in his mind, was irrational, illogical, that why would you worship something that you made with your own hands? God is the one that actually creates, as we see in the story of Jesus and Isa. That the story of Jesus and Isa in the Quran is a story where God is the creator. God is one of the 99 names. He's Al-Khaliq, that he's the one that creates. So the idea of idolatry to Ibrahim is something that's antithetical to anything you could believe in or anything that could be rational. Is that instead of the idea of Al-Khaliq, or the God as the creator, the human, it becomes the creator, and they begin to worship their own idols. Now, in a very intimate scene, you see the Qur'anic Ibrahim, he's talking to his son. And this is the famous sacrifice story where Abraham is speaking to his child. And in the Quran, there is not a clear indication of who this child is. It could be Ismail or Ishaq, Isaac. And the verse starts out and says, when the boy was old enough to work with his father, Abraham said, "My son, I have seen myself sacrificing you in a dream. What do you think?" He said, "Father, do as you're commanded, and God willing, you will find me steadfast." Now, what is fascinating here is that Ibrahim goes to his child and asks him what he thinks. And this is different than the biblical Abraham, where Abraham is told directly by God to act, and Abraham implements. He takes his son out and he attempts to sacrifice him, but an angel intervenes and tells him to stop. Here, Abraham actually has a dream, and he says, "Inni ara fil manam," that verily in my sleep, I have this recurring dream that I am slaughtering you. What do you think about this? And I joke with my students and my classes that if my dad woke up one day and said to me, "Hey, Eunice, I had this dream last night and I was thinking of slaughtering you. What do you think?" I would be like, "Dad, please go back to sleep, have another dream," or I'll run out of the house. This is a very provocative statement. He's telling his son that his dream is that he's going to kill him. But his son is very kind and obedient, an ideal Muslim or one who submits to God, and says, قَالَ يَا أَبَتِي إِفْعَلْ مَا تُؤْمَرُ. And he says in this very kind and endearing way, he says, "Oh, my father, my dear father, do what you have been commanded. سَتَجِدُنِي إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهِ مِنَ الصَّابِرِينَ. You will find me by the will of God among the patient." So we see here that the son is in many ways continuing the father's legacy, that the father has a question, a debate, even doubts, but his son is reassuring him and saying that this is a divine commandment. This dream isn't just a simple dream. This is God telling you to do something. And I know you have this fear, this concern that you are trying to do something that's wrong or going to harm me. But by the will of God, you will find me among the patient. Maria de Cake, who's one of the authors of the Study Quran, has a really nice article that speaks about the Qur'anic Abraham. And she speaks specifically about this story. And she says, "Here too, faith and independent thought coexist. While the command must certainly be inexplicable to them, Abraham and his son's certitude in the justness of God gives them the ability to be patient until the fullness of the situation has become clear to them. Questioning, as in the previous cases, exists within an overall context of belief." And I love that statement because at this moment, Abraham and his son, they don't know what's going to occur. They understand the order, the commandment, the injunction, but they don't know how it's going to manifest and what the conclusion of the story is going to be like. And we see this in the story of Maryam as well, that she's told that she's going to have a son, Jesus, Isa. And she asks the question, this is impossible. How is this going to occur? No man has ever touched me. I've never had any sexual relationships. And the angel says that God has the ability to create whatever he wills, and this is something that he has ordained. So Maryam doesn't know how this story is going to end. She understands that she will become pregnant, that she'll give birth, but who will this child actually be? And how will she be received by her people? So to conclude, we see this really fascinating theme that Maryam exhibits of the idea of questioning, that the various Quranic figures from Maryam to Moses to Ibrahim, they're always asking God questions. And this is not questioning to provoke, and it's not a questioning of disbelief. It's actually a questioning associated with belief. As Maria de Cake says, exists with an overall context of belief, that they're believers, but they have doubts, and they don't understand everything. And they're asking God for guidance and trying to understand the basic cardinals of faith. And we see that the faith and questioning can coexist many times within religious institutions, and within our classes, we explain doctrine. And I see this within many of my students in my classes, that they go to Sunday school or they go to their local place of worship and they're told, believe this, right? Believe this list of things, and that will make you a good Muslim or a good Christian. And they don't necessarily understand all these cardinals or articles, and they haven't been given an opportunity to debate, to ask questions, to have discussions. And the college classroom is sometimes the first time where they're able to have these open discussions regarding faith. And once again, we see the idea of miracles. A theme that occurs throughout the story of Maryam is the miraculous. And scholars in the Islamic tradition, they define the miraculous as kharq al-adat, meaning something out of the ordinary, unusual, that there are certain habits, there's certain things that occur on a natural basis, but all of a sudden something happens that disrupts the normal. And I think miracles is so important in the story of Maryam, whether it's first her getting fruits out of season, or then later having birth of a child. And later on, as we'll see, even her child begins to speak and defend her. And these miracles are essential because they show the uniqueness of Maryam, and that the impossible is actually possible. That Maryam is a special figure, and she has the ability to do things the others may not have to do. And this points to the idea that she's chosen, istafaki, and that she's been purified, taharaki, wastafaki ala nisa al-alamin, that she's someone that is unique among her peers and someone who is a model of faith for women and of all believers. Thanks so much once again for listening to the Islamic Mary podcast. You can always visit my website as well as join my listserv. I'm really excited to speak with you and to share with you my forthcoming book. My publisher just emailed me the other day and mentioned that it's time to think about a cover and think about what artwork we want to put there to attract an audience. And I look forward to continuing to update you on how the book is coming and getting your feedback and engagement. Thanks once again. Take care.